technology expert and PhD candidate in machine learning. And today we'll be talking about innovation with microservices, with serverless, and machine learning. So, automatic hyperparameter optimization for information systems in serverless cloud. What are information systems with machine learning neural networks? Nowadays, with all the advances in machine learning, you cannot imagine information systems without any kind of machine learning, data science, etc. And nowadays, all systems are using machine learning models for accounting, cybersecurity, image, vision, self-driving cars, financial application, medicine, voice recognition, and definitely natural language processing. As we all know, neural networks are trying to mimic human brains, and it's understandable, and predict some very interesting information from the data. Hyperparameters, in turn, are the parameters we pass to the neural networks to deduct the data. And the problem with them is there are multiple hyperparameters, and it looks like nowadays there is no way to make the hyperparameter selection automatic. And our innovation work was to find optimal hyperparameters for a machine learning model. What did we do? As we know, we can have grid layout and we can have a random layout. Definitely, as you can see here, for random layout, we can pick much more exact hyperparameters for our models. What's available nowadays? Several tuning libraries like hyperopt, scikit-learn, AWS SageMaker, skopt, and we can name more and more, but the biggest problem with them is all of them require some manual steps. So what we did do, we figured out the best way to automate hyperparameter selection, taking the machine learning model code. How do we optimize? We definitely can either do it manually, which is time-consuming and model-specific. We can run optimization method, best space algorithm, etc. But what we were trying to do, we were trying to take any arbitrary machine learning model and create and pick the optimal hyperparameter for that model. So how can it be done? Technically, the first step you have to do, you have to find the actual hyperparameter space. And here is the example of the hyperparameters that can be passed to the machine learning model. But the advantage of what we are doing, we are creating that space automatically. So here is the example of machine learning model code in Python and TensorFlow. And our method, our methodology takes that code and automatically figures out which of those parameters are hyperparameters, and just creates the map, the space for the machine learning parameters. Previous work, there are a lot of pioneers, and one of them is James Bergstra. He created several interesting papers. One of them is about hyperparameter optimization library called hyperopt. Here is the graph, how difficult it is to find the actual local minimum or local maximum. Because technically what we are doing is we have a space of 20, 30, or even more hyperparameters. We have a function which is the time and accuracy of the machine learning model. And we have to find this particular point where the value is maximum. Search space is something that I've showed you. And the current state of art is, as I said, manual selection. So what we are doing here is, first of all, we are creating the file that helps us to traverse Keras machine learning model to find the layers and the corresponding hyperparameters. Our system loads this file and parses the actual machine learning model code. It automatically finds all the hyperparameters, and here we have an example that it's a pretty complex task because the Python class can be specified as full length, value can be specified as number. We might create a class and use it like here, for example, relu, or we can just specify the name of the optimizer, which will also technically work. And our model, our methodology handles all of them. And here is the example of the space we create automatically. So input of our model, input of our methodology is an arbitrary machine learning model. It's a Python code. We take this model, we first generate this space, search space, and then we run the model using serverless cloud. And as a previous speaker said, microservices and serverless are very popular, and we are using them, triggering the execution automatically. So auto-parameter substitution. Here is the method we generate. So this is the second step. The first step, as I said, we generate the hyperparameter space, which we pass as a parameter. Second step, we create the method that actually executes the machine learning model with the parameters detected. The third step is we are calling fmin method of the hyperopt library. And that hyperopt library runs our model. As you can see, it has several parameters. This space is the parameter that contains the actual hyperparameters. Model opt function is the actual function that will be executing our model with the different values of the parameters. And once this server is done, we get the optimal list of the parameters is as best. What is the serverless cloud and why do we need to use it? One of the biggest advantages of doing an innovation, we don't need any server for our model to run. We just create the machine learning, we get the input machine learning model file, we generate the updated file with all the space and hyperopt tuning parameters. We place it into S3 bucket, and the Lambda service will be spawned automatically to run all the hyperparameter optimization for us. So it's very important and very efficient. Once it's done, it will output the result string services, and we will be able to save the model for the information system to use it in the future. Here is the architecture of our model. As you see, we can have 3 Lambda functions. Lambda function is the serverless function microservice, which does not require to create any server in advance, and you'll be charged only for the execution time. We save our results into DynamoDB so we can review, update, and analyze them later. And we trigger our Lambda functions by files placed into S3 bucket. And S3 bucket is basically the storage for the cloud. So as you can see, there are these 2 triggers which we use for our system, and we did a lot of results. We did a lot of testing, and we realized we can find very good laws for the resulting hyperparameters. As you can see, the loss is 200s or even 1000s for some of the models. And not to mention, we'll be using all kinds of models, including CNN, RNN, voice computing, CFR, for pretty popular data sets. So we were trying to use as many possible machine learning models to make sure our system works for most of the cases. Able to prove that it indeed works for most of the cases, which was really great. Conclusion. Neural networks nowadays are integral part of information system. Automation and innovation is extremely important. We are using cloud integration because those Lambda serverless functions live in the cloud. And we do best practices enforcement. Given we work in the cloud and each execution of our method requires a separate Lambda function, we have basically limitless scalability. We can process as many models at the same time as necessary. And again, it's reliability and efficiency. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Okay, thanks again, Alex. It's a very interesting talk. And also, I think this topic these days is very popular. Yes. So I will first, again, to give the turn to the audience to see whether any of the audience have questions. Because I really have a lot of questions regarding this topic. If for the time being, if no question from the audience, that I will start from mine.
Okay.
So could you go back to the slides where you show the result of your approach?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was kind of curious, what are the metrics that you use here to evaluate your approach?
Yes, metrics is one of the parameters you specify, and one of the most popular matrices for machine learning models, for especially neural networks, is loss and accuracy. And usually, since accuracy might be overtrained and over or underfitted, loss was the matrices we've been using. And it's nowadays is a standard and state of the art.
Yeah, I see. So I'm actually expecting for some comparisons because to my understanding that you are trying to automatically tuning the hyperparameter. So so I don't know. So maybe because your approach automatically tunes the parameter, and maybe it can be compared with some manually tuned result.
Yes, and actually that might be the future work. It might be the
okay.
We'll be doing, because one of the biggest things what we are doing, we are automating. And we are solving the problem of automation, as you see, for different layers. You know, here we have from 5 to 11 layers for a huge number of parameters, because some of the parameters were like you can see 38 parameters. Mm-hmm. And definitely the number of possible neural networks is limitless. Mm-hmm. And we can train them for different networks. We can categorize the results, and we definitely probably next step will be compare with state of the art, not just saying that, okay, we are getting 1000 laws, but say, okay, this state of the art model is getting like 500. So we have better accuracy.
Okay, I see. Very interesting.
Before we move on, sorry, Tom, I have a question related to this slide here. So I can see here the, sorry for interrupting you, but I think it's somehow related. So first of all, thanks, Alex. It was a very nice presentation. But also here, I can see that the execution time is quite high. So, I mean, for the cat and dog method, or in the slide there were before,
yes,
the execution time is about 64 hours. Which I think is high but I'm not an expert on this field. So can you somehow compare this and let's say, giving a bit of context about this execution time, and if it's, for example, I compare to the manual approach, for example?
It's a well-known problem that execution time takes a while, especially when we are dealing with gigabyte or more terabyte data sets. Training machine learning models definitely requires to run it several times, because manual process will take even longer, because when you do it manually, let me show you this very simple slide. When you do it manually, you will have to most likely check more experiments. But besides that, you'll have to spend the time to detect those hyperparameters and pass them to the libraries. So what we are doing technically, we are using some of the state-of-the-art hyperparameter optimization libraries, which by default, by design, are pretty efficient, and every run they try to find the best possible set of parameters depending on the previous results. But what we are adding in the innovation of our research, first we detect the initial hyperparameters automatically from the code. So the input just the source code, and data scientists don't have to specify particular hyperparameter. And second innovation, that we are using it in the serverless cloud, where scalability is limitless when you pay only for what you're using, and we are using microservice Lambda functions that are being triggered automatically. So that's what we are doing. And the time comparison is basically we are saving time on two fronts. Front number one, detecting hyperparameters. Usually it takes lots of time for the developers to find it and detect it. And let's say if they change model, even slightly adding one or two layers, they have to redo the hyperparameter space. In our case, you just create the file, put it into S3 bucket, and bounce, you'll get the automatic hyperparameter automation and detection.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
Okay, further questions from other audience? Yeah, so because I also have a brief general question.
Yes.
So probably you have heard the term. I mean, recently it come to our mind. So it's called AutoML, which is supposed to automatically build the machine learning models for some non-technical users. So I'm not sure whether you have heard that before, but I believe that is not the exactly same things as what you propose here. But I guess it could
not
be
the same thing, and I will explain you why. And I have
okay,
a wonderful slide that you can see. This is a slide from one of the Amazon conference, which basically says, no machine learning experience required. Nowadays, many companies are pushing the systems that automatically create a model for you, automatically update it, automatically tune it, and it sounds great. The only problem is you have no idea what that model does, what's inside of that model. So our approach gets the best of two worlds. We allow data scientists to create their own models, to write their own code, to implement their own algorithms. So our system is not for people without machine learning experience. And I would like to push it because, in my opinion, it's really scary to just give your data and expect some smart, intelligent application to do it. So we still need to write the code. But then once your code is written, once you implemented your algorithm, you automate your model. That's the advantage of our methodology.
I see. Okay. Thanks again for your very detailed explanations. Okay. Yeah. So I would like to thank all the authors and probably close